Welcome to episode 201 of Silver Lining for Learning. It's amazing we've come this far since March 21st of 2020 to today here in August 3rd, 2024. We've had many guests on this show in the first 200 episodes from Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, China, Thailand, Malaysia, Kenya, Uganda, Chile, Brazil, Italy, UK, Myanmar or Burma, all around the world, from India, of course. And I'm missing a ton. Antarctica, in fact, a couple of times, at least researchers down in Antarctica. We've covered the territory, the whole planet. Of course, the US, Canada, Mexico, list goes on and on and on. And the shows we've had, the first 200 shows. So those watching this show might want to go back and review those shows. We covered micro-credentials. We covered Rwandan filmmakers. We had how to get kids to ask great questions. We've had Asian women leaders on the show, Universal Design for Learning. We've had robotics. I mean, we have all sorts of topics featured here, including studying the Adelie penguins in Antarctica and sending off the kids in schools around the world. Nepali kids learning English from a MOOC and getting ready for college. Just tons of different episodes with different topics. And of course, we had people down where Punya is discussing wellness and mindfulness. But the list can go on and on. I don't want to take up too much time, but just say that the first 200 episodes are filled with wonderful content. Please mine those, please use those, please reflect on those with your students or by yourself when you're running the trails or in your car. There's lots that you can do with the first 200 episodes, and hopefully 201, this episode will lead us into another set of wonderful shows. And we've got Hollywood Squares here today, 9 of us. Chris Dede from Harvard is a co-host of the show with me. Dr. Young Zhao from the University of Melbourne and University of Kansas is with us. He's also been at Oregon and Michigan State and other places around the world. He's a world traveler. Punya Mishra's with us from Arizona State University, our creative contact, because he sets up the shows every week for us and makes them available with a little musical introduction. Myself is Kurt Bong from Indiana University. With us today, we have Marie Heath, and she's not a robot, according to her bio. She's at the University of Loyola in Maryland. We have Merve Basdogan, as I mentioned, from Texas Tech University on the west side of Texas, where earthquakes are happening right every other day, apparently. Merve told me last night that the number one thing that she's appreciated at Texas Tech University, she's been there 1 year as of today or this week, is she's got 3 wonderful research teams going there at Texas Tech, including those in instructional design and ethics and philosophy of technology and, of course, other things. We've got Ahmed Rahimi from Florida, University of Florida. He has a PhD from Florida State. He cannot get out of Florida. Even when hurricanes are coming, he hangs out. I don't know why, but he hangs out in Florida. He likes and go to visit because everything's happening at the University of Florida. It's probably the #1 destination for educational technology today. Lots of funding, lots of wonderful faculty and students. If you haven't had a chance to get to Gainesville, go. And Priyank Sharma. So Priyank, and by the way, our 5th co-host, Lydia Cow, is like Priyank, because Lydia and Priyank couldn't resist this Silver Lining for Learning podcast. The first maybe 50 shows, they were there all the time asking questions. So we had to invite Lydia to be a co-host, eventually invite Priyank back to be a guest on episode 200. And he gets into the field of learning analytics in India. So we've got Maryland, we've got India, we got Florida, and we've got Texas covered at least, along with Boston, with Chris, Arizona, with Punya. We got China and Kansas and Australia with Young and myself, Indiana, and Lydia in Toronto at the University of Toronto. Thank you, Lydia. So I didn't spend much time on your bios, reflective bios, but maybe we can start with Marie and go to Merve and start with the M people and then Ahmed, and then Priyank. Give us a little bit more about your backgrounds. And then once you go through some of that, we'll ask some questions and we'll have a little interactive discussion with each of you. But thank you for coming to episode 201 of SLL. Marie.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you all for inviting us here. This is tremendous. And thank you for that introduction. I am at Loyola University, Maryland, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. I have my Baltimore shirt on. And that is where I am coming to you from. Before I'm currently an associate professor of learning design and technology at Loyola. Before that, I taught in Baltimore County Public Schools, and I taught as a social studies teacher. And I always say that I'm bringing the humanities to tech. I sort of have never left that social studies lens, which for folks who are unfamiliar with social studies education, the goal of social studies education is citizenship development. And, you know, citizenship is a contested word in the field, and we talk about what that means. But I often bring that lens to any work that I do with technology, and it's sort of the force of technology on our daily lives and our civic lives and what that means for democracy. So how we teach about it. So that's, oh, and I am co-founder of the Civics of Tech project, which has all the names, all the words of things that I like. And along with my colleague, Dan Krucka. And so we sort of run that project as a space to think about, build community and think about the ways that technology acts on our lives and to work towards more just futures together. So I'm looking forward to this discussion as one of the M people.
So you're not a robot, and you should talk to Merve because you have some similar interests. Merve, why don't you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Bong, and it's wonderful to be here. My name is Merve Basdogan. I'm an assistant professor of instructional technology and design at Texas Tech University. My research focuses on the intersection of technology, pedagogy, and education overall. So in my current projects and in my previous projects, I focus on how we can understand the best strategies to enhance student motivation in technology-enhanced learning environments, as well as how we can support faculty, teachers, instructors to be more productive, effective, and meaningful in their learning design and development endeavors. So I am currently teaching 3 different courses, including Introduction to Instructional Technology, How to Research in Instructional Technology field, as well as How to Evaluate technology-enhanced learning environments. And in all of these courses, my main purpose is to help my students understand whenever they see a new technology or technological method or technological knowledge, they should ask the question, what is the value? Is it only going to be a substitute for the existing ones? Or is it going to augment the existing techniques? Or is it modify? Or is it going to transfer? So based on that categorization, they can invest money, time, research efforts, etc. And when I go back to the original question, why I'm in this field, I'm going to go back to high school, actually. I went to a vocational high school in Turkey. It is very different than the typical high schools. So from starting 9th grade, you choose a focus concentration like nutrition, fashion, art, computers, and you have a condensed course load curriculum until you graduate. And my field was computer. Like my other classmates, we were all from economically disadvantaged family backgrounds and from a Freudian perspective, and of course, I didn't know Paulo Freire at the time. I was aware from those years the only way we can break this circle, liberate, transform something, and break the poverty circle is education, and particularly digital tools, actually. Because again, at that time, we were starting to explore YouTube, and although we had some problems, family issues, job insecurities, economical problems, seeing those free movies or creating our own games, this was something hopeful for us. And after that,
I'm
First
going to stop
encounter.
you there, Merve. You're going a little ahead into our questions.
Okay.
So there's a couple things that I want to say. Merve is my former advisee, and she had her podcast show or YouTube channel to teach people in Turkey about emerging technologies. As soon as Merve got to Texas Tech, she got a grant working with adults over 65 in terms of digital literacy in rural communities. So she's done well there. We'll go on to Ahmed in Florida. And has the hurricane landed?
Well, I didn't want to reveal it, but actually I'm coming to you from Tehran. I am visiting my family. I'm in Iran. I'm originally from Iran. So I think I'm now far enough from Florida not being disturbed by the hurricane. My name is Seyedahmad Rahimi. You can call me Ahmad. I got my PhD from Florida State University. Thank you, Kurt, for that interesting introduction. I worked with great minds like Valerie Shute, Fang Ke, Jim Klein, and others in Florida State University. And as soon as I got one course with Val, and she talked about self-assessment, I was locked mentally that I thought like this is a great method for me to learn about and expand on. Now that Val is retired, I'm trying to follow in her footsteps, which is really difficult, but I'm trying my best. If I want to choose a passion or a mission for myself, it's creating advanced technological environments, learning environments that can help students advance their 21st century skills, focusing on creativity and improve their lives and improve their societies that they live in. And in order to do that, I'm using, technologies and advanced methodologies like self-assessment and AI in order to create environments that can personalize students' learning. And I think this is something that I can spend the rest of my career in working and creating various learning environments. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me for a second time. I was invited in the episode 23 when I was a PhD student. Now I passed my third year review as a faculty member.
It's wonderful. We forgot about that. And sorry, I didn't introduce you properly. And welcome coming from Iran. Priyank is also coming from that part, maybe close in time zones to you. What time is it there, Priyank?
It's 9:40 p.m.
Okay. So welcome back. You've visited us before. You've given us feedback, and you've provided help in terms of upskilling, making this program better. So would you like to tell us what's happened in your life since you last appeared?
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, and thank you for running this. I couldn't be online with you, but I keep looking at the episodes, and I can tell you that all of you have been such inspiration, not just with your work, but these podcasts, because it gives people like us, to sit and learn so much. So I think that has been great. Right now, I am a faculty at Indus Teacher Training and Research Institute. So what I've tried to do after I think we previously met, what I've tried to do is that in India, if you see, there are academicians, researchers, and then there are people in the industry, and there are radicals who are in the alternative education spaces. So what I try to do is I've spent a lot of time or little time in these three spaces, try to build bridges. So I try to bring people in alternative education spaces, in the industry conferences, and the academic people in the alternative education spaces. So I've tried to build a lot of bridges here, spent a lot of time in all of these places, and see if they can talk to each other, because specifically in our context, they don't usually talk. So I've gone to different conferences. I'm going to an industry conference next week. There was an academic conference previous week, so it was like going to different conferences and talking to them about different streams. So that is what I've been trying to do, because my whole education has been interdisciplinary. I started as a science and math student, and then I switched to social work, then to psychology, and then later I figured that education is something I want to look at, because why is it happening the way it is? So if I have to put it simply, earlier I used to play with numbers, and then I started looking at what do these numbers mean in certain contexts.
Welcome. I used to play with numbers too as an accountant. I've talked a lot, too much maybe, and we have other co-hosts that need to ask questions. Punya helped set up the show and wrote the blog post initially for it, so he had the questions. So I wonder if, Punya, you want to pick one of the questions you put in the blog post and start us off, or something else, Punya?
Sure, thank you. And again, thank you all for joining us. This is, I remember Priyank talking with you when we had first started. That's when we first got in touch. And Ahmad, you talked about, joining as a graduate student, and now here you are having done your 30 review. And I think, Priyank, your journey has been sort of similar. And if people haven't been following Priyank on LinkedIn, I really recommend it. I think some of your posts there have been very thought-provoking. And now that I understand this context that you shared about moving between, because in India, you're absolutely right. There is sort of the educational research space. There is sort of the industry space, which is in its own little universe. And then you have a whole bunch of people who are working in sort of the NGO space, who are incredibly committed and talented and pushing against a lot of sort of, what the educational system, and we've had many of them as guests on our show as well in the past. And so being able to navigate between them, I've been really enjoyed and appreciated your LinkedIn posts that I've seen come up. So in terms of questions, I mean, there's so many things we could go with, but since we have such a diversity of people here, I'm wondering, given the work that you do and the way you've approached education and your background, what is one skill or subject that you believe isn't taught in schools today or isn't part of our educational system today, but it absolutely needs to be there? Because, we are seeing, education is always in flux. The world is in flux. What are we not talking about? I mean, we have all our, subject, we have physics, chemistry, math, biology, history, civics, what have you. What's not there that we should really be as a group talking about? And I'll go in reverse sequence in what we started. So Priyank, start with you and go backwards to Ahmad, and then Merve, and then Marie, back to you, right? So Priyank, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Panya. I think what we have been not talking about is what not to teach. Essentially, why I say this is there is somewhere an idea that we have to teach everything, whether it is social emotional skills, whether it's simple things like empathy. Everything, there is some happiness. There's something that needs to be taught to students. I think the conversations have to revolve around what exactly you shouldn't teach in schools, because there is, I think, the word which I probably want to use here is what is the culture of the ecosystem that we have to look at. And some things are, the students in schools gain from that culture, from who we are as an individuals. So I think we have to start talking. Probably, yes, of course, we have hundreds things to teach students, but rather also to look at our own selves, because children pick, there's a famous saying, right, that some things are caught, they're not taught. So what are these things which they are catching, and we ourselves as teachers, as people, as stakeholders in that ecosystem, why are we pushing everything that that we need to teach, essentially, probably, and look at our own selves in that and see how we are behaving or doing actions in a certain way, and that is leading to XYZ factors, and not necessarily that everything has to be an outer person coming and teaching.
Just building on what Priyank talked about, I think our educational systems need to move on from teaching knowledge and assessing knowledge to building identities and interests in students, making them self-learners so they can learn whatever they need in any context that they are in. We cannot predict what the students in 20 years from now need to know and be able to do, especially given this common, current AI movement that you can ask AI the rudimentary questions and it can respond to you quickly. I can imagine a lot of tools that can be assistants for students and people in the future, and they don't need to know everything at their fingertips. But they need to be kind, they need to be creative, they need to be problem solvers, and they need to have this identity of self-learners. I think these are very important things that we currently either not teaching or not teaching at scale.
Thank you.
I also agree with Priyank and Ahmed regarding the socio-emotional skills and interconnected thinking. Like, for instance, I learned most of the skills in the workplace or graduate school. For instance, I wish I could learn how to network or how to negotiate conflicts or more self-regulated learning skills from early ages. And also the interconnected thinking, I mean, whenever we are focusing on one field like ecological and at the same time economic and social, that kind of skills at the same time, how we can see the outcomes. Maybe something to add might be engaged citizenship. Currently, I finished my book on cyberbullying, prevention and intervention strategies. So, in one chapter, I'm discussing how we are going to teach students to be critical readers, reviewers of the media, and at the same time to engage into the social sphere in a more democratic and aware way. I think those will be very important in the upcoming 3, 5, 10 years.
Marie?
Sonia, this was the perfect order because I'm going to pick up that thread of engaged citizenship. But first, I'll say that I am the mother of 3 teenagers, and I asked all of them these questions as well. And so, I was like, I need to think about these, but you help me think about them first. And so they both, one was still asleep this morning. The other 2, both independently of each other, responded to this question and said, we'd like something that is sort of like a life skills class, right? So this sort of networking, social, emotional, and also things that are just maybe they wanted like very specific targeted, sort of organizing yourself as an adult kind of skills, like as simple as grocery shopping or making a meal, and also as more nuanced as soft human relation skills like networking and talking with other people. So, and my thread that I'll pick back up is the engaged citizenship thread, which is thinking about school as, for me, as sort of supporting democracy and a space for democracy. And I think we have tried this in schools with, in Maryland, we have a service learning requirement hours, and I think California has something similar. But it sort of gets distilled and maybe not, I think, what the intention is, which is to be in community, to understand that you're part of a community and think about how to be a person in community and for other people. So I would love it if we had some sort of schooling that involved kind of that authentic being in community and doing work with your community and realizing that you matter and all the other folks matter as well.
Does anyone want to jump in after that? Young, Lydia, Chris?
I can jump in. I think this is quite wonderful. First of all, I'm so happy that we have people from different regions, different cultures, but somehow we all hang over, at silver lining for learning. This is great. And so I have many questions, but I'm gonna ask one, because like every one of you are guests. Priyank, it's good to see you here. And everyone is thinking about what to teach, what to teach our children. We believe teaching is almost necessary. So I was just wondering about this idea, but how come, our children, most of us, celebrate our children meeting an expected expectation. For example, oh, we got A's, you got SAT scores. I have an honor student, those labels on the car, all those kind of things. You don't have I have a student who works every day at the community center. We don't have those labels, right? So there is a strong sense of forcing our children to comply with established cultures, values, creativities. But most of us as immigrants, we probably try to run away from those establishments. I came from China, some of you from Turkey, from Israel. So in many ways, we're trying to build something new. And there are a lot of efforts trying to create those criteria and standards and force people to comply. Like I think as Ahmed, you are part of the PISA creativity test, which is a horrible, stupid idea, but they've done it. You consulted with them. I don't know which side you consulted them for. You supported it, you didn't like it. But imagine how stupid it can be to test creativity across so many countries. It's actually freaking impossible. There's no good creativity test in that applies to all of this. But anyway, so I was just wondering, you as young scholars and people who are emerging, what do you think we can do to help our children to become more autonomous, more agentic, in their own way, not so much try to be driven or controlled by established practices, but rather by their own heart, their own passion to drive that. It's a random question, but I'm just curious to say, what are you guys thinking about?
So Zhao, I just have to add one thing. There is a test of creativity. How many uses can you come up for a brick? All right. That has been established as being cross-culturally absolutely consistent as being the most important one. Just being clear that we acknowledge that fact. I'm just being silly.
Oh, no. Some places.
I'm kidding.
No,
man.
I know you're joking. I'm going to follow up with, but some places they don't even have a break. That's the problem, But anyway, go ahead. We can start with anyone. Yeah.
Can I just jump in? I think we really, in the PISA Creativity Project, I was just a PhD student as a consultant working with Val and James Kaufman and others on that team. But I can just say that was a good effort to send a good message to the world that creativity is important. Like if countries know that this type of tests are also being conducted, they may change their policies towards like this type of skills, and maybe they try to improve students' skills in the future. But I think that's a great question, Zhao, that how can we make our children choose their own path and be more agentic and authentic? I think I remember Sir Ken Robinson's talk on TED, which is one of the most watched talks on TED, that he talks about this model of education, which is agricultural rather than like a factory kind of a model, that you have this valley, which he talks about in that talk, that you have this death valley in the United States, that for many years there was no rain, but after just 1 year of raining, all sorts of flowers and beautiful things came out and showed that the potential that exists there, and not all of those flowers were similar, the same. Every different ones have different styles and colors and beautiful. So I think we need to think about this type of educational settings that can help people just choose what they like and they feel more comfortable and go from there instead of forcing on them. But it's very challenging. I think it's very difficult. I don't think it's very easy to be done.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I remember, Zhao, you had a podcast you were running with some people, I don't remember the names, on creativity. So I remember somebody telling how, and you were constantly asking this question that, how do we measure it? And somebody has suggested that we need, one of the most trusted idea is that you have an expert who will decide whether, there is creativity or not. That is what I remember from that episode. But I think it's a very important question, and I think a lot of researchers are still struggling over it. Coming back to your question, I think if we are thinking of agentic children, and I say this again probably, but we have to first see agency in ourselves. I think the place that we have to start from is that how are we agentic in our classrooms? Simple things, when I train IB and Cambridge teachers right now. Like previously I teach train teachers in a rural context. Now I'm teaching IB and Cambridge, trying to see the diversity there. So one of my student, or my mentee, I was working with her, and we are looking at how math, because essentially math is considered as a subject, why it should be taught. A lot of people argue that it should be problem solving and other things. But then we were thinking, can math have aspects where learning mathematics lead to empathy? Can it be possible? Like, is it like some subjects are only or for particular reasons, can they be interdisciplinary in that sense? So when that teacher projects himself or herself in a certain manner to its student, whether it is agency and critical thinking, when you have those arguments discussed in the classroom, I think that is where the children pick it up from you.
I can add something on Priyank's comment on the difficulty of measuring, assessing, evaluating creativity, because if we measure it, it is not going to be creative. It is something standardized again. So it's kind of a loop. We cannot find a solution. However, my own idea is maybe we need to focus on more metaphorical thinking. What I mean is, in the curriculum design, for instance, we should focus more how we can teach some topics with using some analogies, like as teaching electric circuits instead when we use water flowing through pipes, or when we are teaching some economical or nature-related concepts. If we use other analogies, it is going to maybe stimulate other thinking and provide a more habit of metaphorical thinking. For instance, I'm doing it in my graduate courses as well. I took a course from Dr. Bong, Introduction to Instructional Technology. And Dr. Bong, you remember at the end of the course, you asked us, come up with our own definition of educational technology. And in my own course, I borrowed that idea and asked my students to develop a metaphor to explain educational technology. And they suggested amazing ideas, like a fridge metaphor or just a forest metaphor. So these kind of connected learning or analogy-based learning might be something to foster their creativity, I think.
So have we gotten around to everyone on that question from Young, or did Marie have a chance? Did you have a comment on that?
I wouldn't mind hopping in if that's all right. Okay, thanks. I was just thinking that it's something, again, I shared that I'm a mom of 3 teenagers right now, and it's something that I think about often, right, is how can they have a good life, and what is a good life, and is a good life, and what is, and how much have I acculturated them into, part of, this obsession with, or haven't acculturated them into, did I achieve, did I get an A, did I learn a thing? And I think too, again, I asked my kids about those questions, and my oldest said, well, what I would really like is for schools to feel less like prison, and less like it's preparing me to work in a job, and more like it's preparing me to figure out who I am and what essentially like what I would enjoy and feel fulfilled and feel part of the world. And so for that, I think we need to reimagine more than just the ways that we, what we teach or a specific thing, but our whole pedagogical orientation to what learning is and how schools work. And in my sort of perfect world, they would be so much more flexible, so honor different sort of ways of knowing and being, both with each other and with the earth and in a space. And so I feel like Dr. Tiara Tanksley, who does really interesting work on critical race and algorithms, and particularly her work focuses on Black girls, Black bodies, and algorithms. And she was a keynote speaker at our conference yesterday, and she said that she reminded us that abolition doesn't mean just the tearing down, that it's also the rebuilding. And so I kind of think about that orientation towards achieving and that kind of economic focus of really like this analogy that I get good grades so that I get a good job, so that I make more money, so that I do what I mean, is a thing that we can both abolish and then reimagine and rebuild. So I really appreciated that. So that's kind of that's how I was thinking when you shared that it's a question I wrestle with both individually and sort of collectively, like, what is this institution of school?
Thank you, Marie. We're going to Lydia.
Thank you, Kurt. Since we touched upon the question of assessment, I think we can all agree that a lot of learning and education is driven by assessment. We teach, we focus on what the student will be assessed on. And so part of it, unless we can change the approaches of assessment, it's hard to change approaches to teaching, to learning. And I think it's so, schools tend to focus on knowledge acquisition. I think part of the reason is easy to assess. You give a student a written test, a multiple choice is easy to assess. And now I think we are trying to push towards more of, rather than a product-driven learning, to a process-driven learning. But unless we can make assessment process-driven, it's really hard. How do you assess human development that's so complex and hard? So we go back to this kind of knowledge acquisition because it's so easy to assess. So my question for all of you is, what are the cutting edge approaches to assessment that's currently being researched and developed that you think will change education?
That's a real easy one. I'm sure you all will have wonderful answers for us. Who would like to jump in first?
I can jump in. Thank you for that question,
And
Lydia.
Marie thanks you for jumping in first, you notice.
I think the cutting edge assessments, one thing that I always think about assessment is evidence. The word evidence for me is very meaningful. Whenever we want to create a question or any type of task, we always need to ask ourselves, what is good evidence? In psychometrics, good evidence is if somebody can do something, the reason they were able to do that was because they had that knowledge or the skill. It was not because of chance or other things. So that's good evidence. If you can create a question that can give you good evidence, you have gone half of the way. But I'm not focusing my research on traditional for learning, of learning assessments. I'm focusing on assessments for learning and process-based assessment, as you mentioned. Stealth assessment is one method that I have been working on with my advisor, Valerie Schut, as I mentioned before. And it's based on this psychometrics framework called Evidence-Centered Design Framework of Assessment, coming from psychometrics. It is a top-down approach where you first design the competency model that you want to assess. You ask the literature, you ask the experts to define what is it that you want to assess. Then you think about indicators as evidence of that type of competency, and then you design your environment, kind of like going from top to bottom. But we know that there are other methods, machine learning methods that are bottom-up approaches. You have the data in digital learning environments, and then you make interpretations about what those things can mean in terms of assessing students' skills. I think in the future, we will have more of these type of assessments, and they could be kind of in the background helping the students and the teachers to free up some time from their time in classrooms. As you know, like this pattern of teaching, stopping, then assessing, then teaching, stopping, all of those stops, if they could be taken out of our educational systems, a lot of time can be freed up, and people, teachers and students can spend more time together, talk to each other, and learn more. I think that's a good future. A quick memory that I can share here. I went to the Games Expo, which is something that happens every year in Washington, D.C. People that work on game-based learning come there and share their findings. I was on a panel with all of these high school students sitting there. One of them asked me this really interesting question, that what is the thing that you want to work on in the future? And I said, I'm trying to make the tests eliminated from the schools. And everyone was like cheering up and laughing and saying a lot of good things after that. So I think it's a good future to at least think about.
Anyone else want to address this question? Merve?
Sure. Due to the nature of my courses, I am actually, my favorite assessment technique is portfolios. It is very great, a combination of evidences from multimedia, textual, visual productions of my students. But also I agree with Ahmed, we are going to see more quantitative assessment techniques like sentimental analysis, especially for online courses, analyzing students' emotions in even a video conversation or in some assignments. Those are going to give us more evidences or just outputs regarding their engagement, happiness, motivation in the learning space. But for me, I'm more inclined to qualitative evidences. For instance, because of the AI, I'm recently using more podcast style reflections rather than a written reflection. So I'm matching my students randomly in the classroom, and they are just talking about what they learn, and it is turning into an archive for their educational backgrounds as well. Yeah, that's all.
Great. I like that. Priyank wanted to jump in, I think. All right, Priyank?
Yeah. So, I was just thinking about this. So I figured that the answer to this, great question by Lydia could change with the position I take. As a researcher, if I think, then I probably will be thinking in terms of summative, formative, diagnostic, or whether it is assessment for learning, off learning, with learning, and things might change there. And if I go to the industry side, I would be thinking both in quant and qualitative terms, which I think everybody has talked about. Just to touch upon the third category, which I was discussing. See, and I see this in schools also, that is the reason I want to pitch this. So when we say we want to assess, I think we start with asking why we want to assess, right? So I think what is happening is there are certain learning outcomes, there are certain goals that we want, and probably not the child who is there. It is not coming from them. So we have to also probably ask that, is it the child who is asking for the assessment for their own, or whether it is assessment or feedback, who is coming and saying that, okay, this I need to learn, that is the reason, or is it us who wants them to achieve a certain outcomes and certain learning goals? I think that is probably one thing which changes the way we look at assessment itself.
Thank you.
Is it all right if I jump in as well?
I was just going to say, you had a chance to think about this now, Maria.
I did. Thank everyone. I appreciate everyone else jumping in first. I was thinking, full disclosure, I'm very qualitative and sort of take critical approaches to scholarship and assessment as well. And so it's sort of like I internally kind of just have a gut recoil reaction when I think about quantitatively just capturing something like learning in this quantitative way and thinking about it as its own technology, right? Once we turn learning into some sort of quantitative system, whether it's numbers or A, B, C, D, E, that we begin to, that changes the way we look at it then. It allows us to see learning as a thing that is therefore becomes quantifiable. It directs the way that we like learning design, right? It then directs that. If it is a thing that can be quantified in some way, that it changes, and I teach understanding by design. I do backwards design, right? And I think about, these are my goals and this is my assessment and here's how I want to get folks there. But also there's something that feels that I don't like about that. And especially as I keep thinking more about the purpose of schooling and sort of like a Neil Postman, the ends of education, what's my why and why am I doing this, is that my assessments, sort of like Merve have said, have gotten a lot more reflective and sort of project based. So often for my students, we learn something, but then all of what we learn, you have an imperative to act. Like once you know, and once you know, the question is, what will you do now that you know? And so it is the doing that I am always trying to get to, right? So we learn something so that we can do something about it for ourselves or for each other. And so we do a project and reflect on that. So it's, for me, as I've spent now, 20 plus years in education in different ways, I less and less like turn to traditional assessment and more turn toward project-based and reflective assessment. Because I realized that I tried to align my assessment with my instruction, but I was recoiling at the way I was defining what assessment and learning was. So I had to change that for myself.
I like that word, recoiling. Chris wants to jump in here. Chris.
So I like the format that we have with Silver Lining for Learning, where episode 200 has people who've been around for a while, like the original four co-hosts, and those guests, and we can put today in context, in a larger historical context. But then we have this episode, which is a counterbalance, which has Lydia and guests who are at the start of their career. And so my question is really based on that. In more than half a century in the field of learning technologies, I've never seen a time like this one, when so many powerful technologies are becoming affordable, practical, scalable, and potentially available for transformation. And I'm going to ask each of you if you have an aspirational vision of something that might happen by 2030 that would be technology enabled, that would really transform learning in a positive way from your perspective. I'm not saying predict, because aspirational visions assume that everything goes well, which almost never happens. But I do think you are better positioned than many people who've been around for a long time to see the world with fresh eyes and to have these kinds of transformational visions. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And Lydia, you can count yourself into that group.
That's a great question, Chris, because my follow-up question will link to it. So Lydia, Priyank, Merve, Maria, Ahmed, who wants to jump in on this?
I can.
You're mute. Okay, go ahead.
I think I see a shift from more traditional age-based grade system towards a more personalized, more decentralized education, or sometimes mixed intergenerational learning will be something important in the upcoming years. I think I recently completed a technology mentoring project. Dr. Bonk mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. I matched teacher candidates with individuals older than 65 years old, and it was a mentoring how they learn, how teacher candidates get some practical lessons at the same time how adult individuals learn technology. So this is something I realized there as well. If you are introducing a new topic, regardless of their age, experience, they can learn the same way. And when I look at the traditional chronological age-based system, I'm including kindergarten, elementary, high school as well. So they have lots of assumptions in terms of one size fits all. And I think they are going to change because information, as you say, Dr. The information is available everywhere. We can, in the free versions, we can access to all digital tools, research tools, and it's creating a big transformation. And then age will be a very minor, non-important, very insignificant variable in this change. So this is something I kind of imagine in terms of classroom design. And also I can add, we are going to change some changes in the space design as well. For instance, I anticipate we are going to see more museum-like classrooms in the future. 3 weeks ago, I was in Houston and I had a chance to see the Space Center, and it was an amazing in terms of instructional design and technology, amazing strategy. I learned at the same time the physics, ethnography of space studies, politics of space studies, and I think it's very helpful, useful. We will see much like hybrid versions of those museums-like classroom environments.
So in a prior show, we had Stacy Maroney on from Indiana University, our dean of the School of Ed. Merve used to work for her. And so some of the studies that Stacy cited were what Merve was involved in. So go back to that. I don't remember what episode it was. I'll try and look that up. Who wants to go next? Yeah, Marie.
Thanks, Kurt. I really like this question, Chris, because it's like a dreaming question as opposed to a prediction question. And I know I'll get a prediction question wrong. So I would much rather have a dreaming, imagining question. And I sort of think I can think I know what I don't want, and I can kind of I'm starting to dream what I do want. So I know that in my vision and dreaming for schools, I kind of reject we can do this more efficiently, or we can streamline this. Any technology that's meant for efficiency, I am always a little curious about, because I wonder if learning should be efficient, if learning is efficient, and what kind of learning that means if we're asking for efficiency and to make it more rapid, or to try and automate what a human is doing. I wonder about that sometimes too. So my dream is more this kind of dream of technology supporting caring. And so one time a child said that they wanted technologies that could help them care for each other more. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I think what that would look like in schools, I've kind of been really inspired there as an artist. His name is Jackson Two Bears, and I just read an MIT article about his work and the ways that he kind of uses multimedia and design to and co-collaborate with folks to reinvigorate and reimagine and combine his indigenous knowledge with technology. I like things like capturing and preserving language, Keone Mahalona does this with the Maori language. He is Hawaiian, but using AI for those kind of purposes is really cool. So for me, it's these powerful use cases of people who are often disempowered or using technology to kind of reclaim and renavigate and work towards justice and decolonial approaches. So that for me is kind of my dreaming use of technology, and it's less about making things efficient and more about making things caring. So that's, I think, what I would dream for.
Let's stay with ladies first and go to Lydia.
Thank you, Kurt. I think to answer Kurt's question, I'm gonna use one of the things Kurt often say is we tend to use technology to do the conventional things better rather than use it to do better things. And I think we see that a lot in education systems, such as a smartboard. And then when I was a teacher myself, I know we end up using a blackboard rather than leveraging its affordances and really rethink the philosophy of education, the pedagogy of education, as well as the assessment. What are we really trying to achieve in the classroom? So I think for these rapid development with AI technologies, I think it is natural for people to jump in to say, wow, how can we make this to a great tutor? So end up reinforcing this kind of transmission model of teaching, this knowledge as acquisition model of learning. I think we need to rethink what other ways we can leverage this technology to not repeat the old model of education, almost to reinforcing and scaling it even further. What the alternative models of education there that was really hard to do, but with the technology we can do. So I'm thinking about such as collaborative learning and assessing collaboration. And I think with AI, we can creatively use AI to help students to collaborate better, to give students feedback, so to help to enhance their process of learning rather than just focusing on the final artifact or the final product of learning. So I guess my aspiration is to leveraging these technologies for other models of education that we previously haven't been able to scale before.
And we have Priyank and Ahmed who would like to jump in. Priyank, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Chris, for the question. So I just want to point out what I feel is, with technology, there are so many things which travel, but one aspect which also travels is hope and inspiration. And why I want to focus on this is that, see, imagine a ghettoized space, and these spaces are are full of people who are unable to even dream because of what is the kind of access they have. And now, like, I've spent time in there, and somebody asked me long back, what is your dream India like? The only answer I could give was that a place where everybody could at least dream. Right now our own dreams are restricted by the places we come from, and we probably at times don't realize the privilege we have in our ability to dream itself. So with technology, what becomes possible is the democratization of this, and people have been able to see that this is possible for us to also do. However, in India, specifically in our context, what I feel is that technology has ended up becoming a distraction. Why I say this is, so there have been a lot of edtech companies and edtech which we have brought in, and we have started saying that this will lead to giving quality education to the last mile, and we, I think, are not really focusing on what that mile really requires. And a lot of funds, money, both from the government and the non-state, has been pumped in these products and everything, which don't even survive for a few years. So I think with such huge potential, we need to probably in India at least recalibrate what we want technology for and how we can make the most of it, because yes, we are living in unprecedented times, as Chris said.
So Ahmed, we'll wrap up with you, and I'll ask my question after it. And can I ask you to do it in 1 minute so we can get one more question in?
Quickly. Thank you so much, Chris, for this great question. Are you ready for my I have a dream speech? I don't think we have time for that. So I think, as William Gibson says, that the future is already here. It's not just evenly distributed. I think I'm dreaming to see what we are seeing in some countries, for example, in Singapore, Uruguay, in the United States, everywhere on the planet, for all kids. That's a dream. I know that it's not going to come true soon, but that's a dream. I dream that there is no tests in the schools, and all the interactions that the schools do is evidence for their learning, and they're learning great things. They're being creative. Creativity is at the top priority of schools to teach and foster. Collaboration, kindness, social emotional skills are the first priority of this educational systems, rather than memorization or other things that can be done with technology. So that's my dream.
So I guess we have some people in the chat having a wonderful conversation about assessment. Thanks, Tom Reeves, and thanks, Danielle. We appreciate you coming in, and anyone's welcome anytime, any week, to ask questions there. I think we have to ask these 4 brilliant young people the most, well, a question. I won't say it's the most important. For our next 200 shows, what topics, what themes, what people, or what regions of the world should we feature? Do you have any suggestions for us? We'd love to borrow or steal your answers, so we don't have to work so hard coming up with guests for the show. So in any order, it doesn't matter. Anyone have some suggestions for us to think about? And that includes people in the YouTube channel who might want to make suggestions as well. Marie, you're smiling, so I'll let you go first.
Sorry, I was looking up some names while you said that. But I would definitely love to see, I really appreciate the work of folks who are doing critical tech scholarships sort of broadly, like Ruha Benjamin and Joy Bulamwini and Timnit Gabru or Alex Hanna. I sort of like try to think about ways to bridge their work with the work of education. So, which is interesting, but is hard, to think about what that means for us in education. So I would love to hear interviews with those folks and doing folks work similar to that.
Okay. Anyone else have a suggestion? Priyank, you have any that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there are people who are doing some great work in small pockets. I know in India specifically. So when we are thinking of systemic change, we are thinking of large. I think these are small spaces which are trying to do fundamentally changes in the context, and I try to see how we can build these systems, scale these systems instead of the ideas. But I think these are important people who changed a lot of things in that context because of this small phone initiative. I think that you can bring.
Sounds good. And Ahmed?
I wanted to suggest bring some people from these high-tech companies who are kind of leading us in this environment like OpenAI, and also at the same time bring folks from education. You guys are already there and you can talk to them, but it's good to make these communications more vivid in the community, so they can talk and talk about their issues, and also educators, teachers, researchers from education can talk to them.
We'll end with Merve, not just because she's my former advisee, but because she's working in this field since grade 9. So you've been thinking about this a lot since grade 9. Go ahead, Merve.
I think also for this suggestion, Mary gave me inspiration too. You should include this dialogue, kids, maybe teachers. That will be very interesting. You can ask them directly their experiences, because I believe in a decentralized learning, rhizomic learning. I think giving the stage to elementary school, high school students might be a very interesting episode.
And Marie typed something in the chat. Marie, go ahead.
Thanks, Kurt. Yeah, I realized that I forgot to add Shana White, who does really amazing work for the Kapor Center doing equitable computer science. And she was a teacher for a long time, and now she's full-time with them, but has done great work with them.
We appreciate your suggestions today, your suggestions tomorrow, and anytime in the future. Anyone who's listening to this broadcast later on and has an idea, please send to myself or Christine or Punya Mishra or Lydia Kao or Yang Zhao. We've been delighted to have you on this show, episode 201 of Silver Lining for Learning. We've learned a lot. We're going to continue to learn a lot in the next couple hundred episodes. But we have to briefly introduce the next one. And before I do that, well, the next one's just a guest chat at noon. So that will be next week, Saturday. That will be August 10th at noon. Come then. But let's all give a high five. This is the one time we're in Hollywood Squares. A high five to everyone. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this show and listening. And Tom and everyone is listening in the chat. Thank you as well.